This is the time. Look into your eyes. I look into your eyes. No longer mine. No, you're no longer mine. The silence will drown. The silence will drown.
Hello, and welcome back, guys. It's me, your host, Bashira, coming all the way from England, London. And we are here today again to talk about the amazing production, Better Than Ice Cream. But today, guys, we have a treat. It's going to be slightly different. So yes, we are definitely going to be speaking about the production, the audio love drama series, Better Than Ice Cream. But we also have a guest in the studio, and I'm delighted to introduce her in a little while. But before I introduce her, let's just have a little recap about what's been going on so far. So currently we are up to episode 5. And if we kind of look at the episode so far, what we have is our main characters, Janie and Lance, who have reconnected after a 15-year hiatus. They've come back together and they've decided to connect romantically, sexually, intimately. And as some of you may remember, Lance actually has an ex-fiance called Stacy, and Janie actually has an ex-boyfriend called Derek. Now, what's been happening so far is the ex-partner's ex-fiance, ex-boyfriend has come back into the mix, causing quite a strain between the relationship of Janie and Lance. And it's left poor Janie in a serious conundrum because she thought that she had received a letter from Lance declaring his love to her, only to discover, or did she discover, that apparently this letter was written by Derek, her ex-boyfriend. But the plot gets thicker because if you guys recall, last week's episode saw Janie accept the marriage proposal of her ex-boyfriend Derek in the presence of Derek's mother, whose birthday it was, in front of a host of people, where Janie has accepted Derek's marriage proposal. And then on the flip side to that, we have Stacy confirming in public without first consulting Lance that she is pregnant with his child. Janie is aghast, Lance is a guest. Stacey, I think Stacey's actually loving all of it. And then we have the mothers. We have the mothers of Janie and also Stacey having a go at each other. So these two elder ladies are at it, basically trying to support their daughters. So it's chaos, it's madness, it's drama, it's real hot. And so today, what I would like to do is to introduce a very special guest. Her name is Deja Collins, and she has a phenomenal, guys, podcast, and it's called Sad Girl Sunday. Girl is spelt GRL, so there's no I. That's Sad Girl Sunday, and it's a podcast. So I am going to welcome into the studio the most beautiful Deja Collins. Welcome, Deja.
Hello. Thank you so much, Bashira, for having me.
Hey, it's absolute pleasure for me to have you in the studio today. So please, Deja, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then if you could also then elaborate on your podcast, Sad Girl Sunday, for our viewers, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. So I am currently based out in California. I guess just to get started into how Sad Girl Sunday even came about, I was honestly really going through it in 2018. And I was trying to find a way to channel everything that was going on, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I didn't really know what to do. And so originally it had started out as an Instagram where I was like, let me just put up really inspirational quotes, or, let me put up pictures and just try to be as transparent about my journey and my journey in wellness and mental health. And it started as an Instagram forum. And then all of a sudden COVID happened, and clearly things were put to a halt and the world kind of stopped. And so myself and my co-host on the podcast, Ida, we got together because we were both based out in California. We were like, you know what? We should really turn this into a podcast, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to give people the ability to have access to all of these different topics surrounding mental health, which really isn't a topic that was talked about often, especially in the Black community. And so we started Sad Girl Sunday. We transformed it from just an Instagram platform to a podcast platform. And it has been great. It's really blown up in terms of just the amount of support that we've gotten from it, the people who are kind of requesting different episodes and different topics. So something that started so small and just a way for me to process what I was going through really transformed into this amazing podcast.
Amazing. And how long has the podcast been running then? Was it something that was conceptualized because of the COVID, in terms of, because you mentioned about putting out quotes, so how did it sort of translate, or I guess grow from quotes into a podcast?
Exactly. No, I think COVID really kind of served as the catalyst, I think, for a lot of people in order to take on separate projects or just start businesses, or really expand on ideas that we've always had. And so we are very brand new. We actually started our first episode this February. So like very, very new. So we were really shocked at kind of the support that we've gotten thus far, but we love it. And we love it because it provides us so much momentum to keep going, because we know that what we're providing to people is actually helping. But yeah, I think COVID really served as kind of the catalyst for us to be like, you know what, we're all, as a, globally going through it. And so we need to be putting out all of this information in order to help people process what's currently going on in today's world and the social events that are going on, whether it's the racial events that we're seeing, or lack of financial stability, or all of these things that are currently happening and that are impacting the Black community the most.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Can you please let our viewers and our listeners know where it is they can actually listen to the podcast, and how often does it actually run?
Yeah, so you can find the podcast on Apple Podcast. If you just look up Sad Girl Sunday, as Bashira said, it's spelled SADGRLSUNDAY. And then we also have an Instagram page too. So if you just look in Instagram at Sad Girl Sunday, but our Instagram actually has an underscore after the Y in Sunday. So those are the places that you can find it, and they come out bi-weekly. So we just finished our first season. We have 13 episodes out, and season 2 is starting on June 20th, and it's going to be a whole mental health series. So I'm very excited to get that going.
Amazing. And as you've just spoken, Deja, about the mental health, what was it about, I guess, mental health as a whole, which drew you to that as a subject, topic matter that you really wanted to delve deeper into and obviously bring forward for your listeners to actually listen to and take part of?
Yeah, my background actually is in healthcare. I got my master's in bioethics, so I was really interested in kind of the ethical imbalance in care within the Black community, lack of access to care, and so that kind of, I guess, pivoted more so into mental health and conversations that weren't really happening within our community. And like we were saying, COVID not only exacerbated that for the whole kind of globally, but also just within our community, wanting to provide an outlet, wanting to provide resources to individuals who are going through it, who might not even have the vernacular to know what's happening right now with them, or who don't feel comfortable maybe talking about it with their parents or their friends or their family. They can look to our Instagram, they can look to our podcasts for some sort of solace.
Absolutely, I completely understand. And is there any way that people can actually interact with the podcast, or is it where yourself and your partner talk quite openly about mental health and its impact as a whole within the community? Or is it something that people can actually engage with, maybe on social media? They can send questions in, or maybe any concerns that they might want to have you possibly address or look at, or just to gain some links or resources in order to support them?
Yeah, absolutely. So our DMs, obviously, on Instagram are always open. So we love when people ask questions or they request certain topics that they want us to discuss. But also, we are starting our kind of merge into Clubhouse on the Clubhouse app. So on Sundays, when our episodes come out, we'll be also live on there at noon Pacific Standard Time, so that people can kind of have that active and live conversation. They can ask questions. They can be part of a forum where we're all discussing the topic of the week. So our first topic for our season 2 is going to be anxiety. So we'll be having a podcast episode coming out on that. And we'll also be live on Clubhouse where people can ask questions, kind of just build a community talking about anxiety, things that they're going through, things that they want us to maybe dive deeper into next episode. So
excellent. And I'm glad you just said the word episode, because obviously that sort of links it back for me to Better Than Ice Cream.
Yep.
As the host of Better Than Ice Cream, just in case you're not aware, I'm also a singer, performer, a songwriter, and an actor. And so listening to this Love audio drama series, which has been written by Diana Copeland, and it's also been produced by Diana and directed by somebody called Julia Sadinsky. This is basically a team that's been built up of phenomenal women working behind the scenes, myself up front, and obviously the actors, both male and female, who have come together to basically bring the vision and the writing skill to life from Diana Copeland. And within the theme of Better Than Ice Cream, it's quite apparent that there are some definite tentacles into the mental health spectrum, especially for our lead female character, Janie, who finds herself in quite a conundrum, having just separated from an ex-boyfriend, then getting very romantically involved with another guy, which is our main lead character, Lance, to then be totally caught in the middle and accepting of a marriage proposal from her ex-partner Derek, for then Janie to find out that Lance, the person that she really wants to be with, ultimately has a child conceived with his ex-partner Stacy. So it's a mess, and it's very, very dramatic. And as you can imagine, if we were to take that storyline and put it into the reality spectrum of people's lives, the impact of that in terms of mental health would be quite intense. And I think Absolutely. It's fair to say that relationships can be as intense as that, can be quite almost destructive, because the emotions that come up out of our feelings for the people that we love and care about on a romantic level can be very, very intense, because there's so much going on. We want our feelings to be met, and then equally we're trying to meet the feelings of the person that we're in a relationship. Add to that the dynamics of ex-partners or ex-fiancés, then we have a whole ton of stuff going on. And as I've just mentioned, in terms of Lance, the main lead character, his ex-fiancée is pregnant. And then we have the lead female character, Janie, whose ex-partner had just asked her to marry him. And on top of that, she said yes. So we're at a really explosive sort of point within the actual love audio drama series, Better Than Ice Cream. I know you've been watching.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what's been happening so far? And how do you think that interpenetrates the whole mental health?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, in all of the episodes and that I've been listening to, there are some major themes that I'm seeing, whether it's, infidelity with Janie and Derek, or even just coping mechanisms, the whole idea of the Better Than Ice Cream, how Janie kind of puts her sadness and puts all of that and channels that into eating ice cream all the time. So we're seeing the need for self-care, but we're also seeing depression, perhaps, when Janie went through, like Lance was saying, I guess this was back in their high school days when she went through that week and she didn't talk to anyone and she didn't do anything. And so all of these themes that we're starting to see in each of the episodes really ties back to mental health, and more so maybe not even knowing that that's what she's currently experiencing, or that's what they're currently experiencing at these certain times. And even just, toxic relationships, how Lance and Stacy was calling him and stalking him and hiring a PI and all of these things that are really important to kind of break down. And while it is such a kind of interesting and juicy, like you were saying, love square really that's going on, there are a lot stronger themes that we can start to unpack and see how mental health is really intertwining in both of these individuals' lives, both Janie and Lance. And now having the mothers added into it is like a whole
exactly.
complex.
Exactly. It's so intense. There are so many dynamics that are coming out, and we're literally only up to episode 5, so we haven't even aired episode 6 yet. So can you kind of maybe foresee what could possibly happen with regards to our main characters, or even some of the other characters that are involved, like the parents, the mother, the ex-fiance, the ex-partner? Like, what dynamics possibly in terms of themes could you see maybe coming out that could still kind of interpenetrate the whole mental health conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, what my main thing is, I see kind of moving into the next episodes, Janie reverting back to that depressive kind of ice cream and all of that, because she's now lost this super strong relationship and also friendship that she's had with Lance for decades, And so I see her reverting back to that, but also with Lance and Stacy, that relationship has already been extremely tumultuous. And now adding a kid into the mix, I don't really think that adds any kind of stability. So trust, all of the major themes of any important or stable relationship is going to be tested. And so I think this is really important, where they're able to look to people, and typically it would be Janie and Lance leaning on each other, but they can't do that anymore. So now who are they going to turn to be able to break down and unpack all of this craziness that's currently happening? And if you don't have anyone to turn to, that is where mental health issues and those things arise.
No, absolutely. And I think you've hit something on the nail, the head on the nail on the head, which is really, for me, the parents, who are the elders within the storyline, but they are actually going at each other as well. Mm-hmm. So perhaps there could be better examples that the parents could set, because it is a tumultuous situation. It is very tense. Nobody quite knows how it's going to go right now. And so obviously for both the lead characters, being able to draw on their parental support or guidance, I think could be advantageous at this stage, instead of perhaps the mothers getting at it. But even saying that, I can kind of understand the emotion behind the mothers, because they're only wanting to protect their children ultimately from, upset or heartbreak. So it's quite a conundrum, I think, that they all find themselves in. And I mean, I guess the question I would ask you is, out of all of the characters so far, who do you think really is the person that's been impacted the most, whether it's from a heartbreak perspective or even mental health or just confusion as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's tough. It's like a tie, I think, really between Janie and Lance, because I think they have the most to lose. Janie not only is in this relationship with Derek that she's obviously not even wanting to be in, saying yes to a marriage proposal she really had no interest of saying yes into and felt guilted into, really. but also just losing the friendship with Lance, now having the fact that she can't even rekindle that because there's a potential baby that's obviously going to overweigh any kind of saying that she has in that relationship. And knowing the way that Janie processes difficult times or emotions, I feel like she's not only the most impacted, but will feel it the most and will have that the most, maybe the strongest reaction to everything that's going on, because Derek doesn't really seem two-faced with everything that's going on, and Stacey is loving this.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. I was gonna say, like, I can see with both Stacey and Derek that there's almost a level of enjoyment and almost like, no, that they're kind of getting out of seeing what's happening with both Lance and Janie. I think it's very obvious to both Derek and Stacey that something is going on between, Lance and Janie, and they are both doing on each side their best to crumble that. And so far, so good.
Yeah.
Because
no, absolutely. I think they have really trapped, for lack of a better word, both Janie and Lance, because with the marriage proposal, that's kind of ensuring that Janie is with you forever and you can't, and then with pregnancy, that's really putting Lance in a position of whether he wants to or not. He has to be a responsible father and kind of step up into that role. Even if he doesn't want to do that with Stacey, he now has to.
So what I'd like to do, guys, is actually pick up on a couple of points from Better Than Ice Cream that I think kind of really works well with having our guest Deja in the studio. So if we remember, we're going to talk about one of the characters, Derek, who is the ex-partner of our lead female, Janie. So let's just kind of unpick a little bit of background about Derek and what it is he's actually done in relation to his relationship with Janie.
I recapped the entire thing to my friend while sobbing in a pathetic video chat, beginning with the 2 years we spent together, brushing our teeth in the mirror, and ending with the discovery of another woman's nudes in his deleted iCloud folder. I spent weeks replaying it in my head, trying to delete the memory of the mysterious woman in the photo, and how suddenly I was the toy Derek was no longer interested in playing with. Now, I'm here, back home, stranded in my mother's living room at the neighborhood block party.
This resulted in Janie ending the relationship, fleeing the relationship home, and coming back home to stay with her mother. And that's where the whole concept of eating ice cream to comfort herself comes from, hence the title Better Than Ice Cream. Let's just speak with our guest in the studio with us today. Hello again, Deja. Are there any questions that you kind of see or come to the forefront of your mind in relation to the character Derek and the position that he's had thus far in Janie's life, especially considering that he's now actually asked her to marry him and Janie has unexpectedly said yes?
Yeah, no, I have so many questions about Derek. I mean, my biggest one, especially after episode 5, was how did Derek know about the letter? Because the big plot twist is we find out what we originally thought Derek had wrote, Lance wrote, but then how did Derek know? I also think that it's really important to kind of address the fact that we know what Derek did wrong, but we never really see this big grand gesture of an apology, just a marriage proposal. And so is that like the way to apologize? Is that what he's doing instead?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. And also, I think what it actually goes to as well is the mental state of Janie. Like, why did she feel so pressurized, irrespective of the fact that it was, Derek's mother's birthday? But why would she feel so pressurized to say yes? Was it about the looking good factor for her in front of Derek's mom and the guests and Derek himself? Or is there actually an undertone here of perhaps Janie still having feelings for Derek?
I mean, I think it might be a little bit of both, because from what we find out is that Janie's still under the impression that Derek wrote the letter. And even in the episode, she's kind of saying, being around him, being in the room, smelling his cologne, like took her back to simpler times. And so she definitely still has feelings for him. And I think it's hard to not. They were together for 2 years and they didn't end because they both had parted ways and they like copacetically were like, we're better off. They ended on a really bad note. And so I think it'd be kind of just, she's obviously going to still have feelings for him. And I don't think that she's processed that yet. She kind of jumped right into that relationship with Lance. But I also think on the other hand, the guilt that she feels because of the relationship with her mom and or relationship with Derek's mom and all that he did, all that she did in order to really promote her career and allow her to even publish the book that she did. So
totally. And what would you say for any of our viewers or listeners that are maybe going through a similar experience where they are literally caught between two men or two women, in terms of a connection, a love connection, where there's a past with an ex and then there's a current with the present love interest? I mean, what would you say? How best can they navigate that and not break any more hearts, including their own?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard. I think any relationship that really has an ultimatum, such as like a marriage proposal or something, is, especially when both parties aren't on the same page of knowing or wanting that, is very difficult. But in a situation like this, I really would have encouraged Janie or anyone who's going through this, even maybe not to say yes, but to kind of pull him aside and be like, you know, this is great, thank you so much, and then explain what's going on. But by saying yes, that only further breaks hearts, because now when his mom finds out, when Derek's mom finds out, that's going to be crushing for her. It's also going to be embarrassing because everybody's going to be like, well, I thought you were going to get married, you know? So I think in this situation, honesty really is the best policy on Janie's part. There's no point in saying yes to then go ahead and have to kind of backtrack from that. And by also being honest and upfront with Derek, that would have saved everybody the trouble, because Lance would have run into Derek and had that whole fiance fiasco.
Exactly. So there would really be no getting away from it. And I guess it almost poses another question about the level of toxicity within the relationship. And is it almost the norm now, even in reality? So, you know, people who are listening in, our viewers, you know, our audience members, is this almost reality, the level of toxicity that we see or hear about in relationships? It almost appears quite commonplace. So is this almost the new norm, or do you think that it's really about people having to reevaluate their value system and really kind of take themselves on in terms of their self-work, self-control, you know, and just kind of, you know, almost like a self-cleanse to kind of eradicate thoughts and emotions that are really not serving their higher selves? Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think that at the crux of it, we've gotten a lot into this idea of situationships, you know, where nobody's really quite on the same page.
Exactly.
And it proves for a very, not necessarily toxic, but just confusing relationship with that individual, because if you're both never really on the same page, you don't know where you stand.
Exactly.
And then when things go left or somebody has an ex that comes into the picture, well, we're not really together, but we're together. So I think we've kind of gotten into this era of situationships, but also the breakdown of communication is really where a lot of bad things start to happen. And so I think it's extremely important that you said, you know, self-care, being very upfront about the values that you have, you know, and I think that if Janie had made that clear with Lance, honesty, transparency, all of those things, and done the same thing with the Derek, maybe we wouldn't have ended up here. But I think right now, moving forward for both of them, communication is key, because there's also a lot of lack of communication where people don't really know, because Janie's still under the impression that Derek wrote the letter, not Lance.
Right.
So
exactly. No, absolutely. And I think even talking about with Lance, because Lance's character, he's quite subdued. So he does a lot of internal talking with himself, about himself, and obviously about his feelings that he has for Janie. So then we have the in the episode where he's written a song, a love song specifically for Janie.
Every note of that song came straight from my heart. It took me 2 years to complete it. I wrote it as I stared out of that window, each time just writing a little more as I watched it. After every boyfriend, after every heartbreak, after every disappointment, until finally that song was complete. I titled it "She Can Find Love Again" because I always knew that she would. I've been trying to hide my feelings for Janie so they weren't splashed across my face, but it was impossible. So she could see right through me. When I stopped playing, she leaned in and she kissed me. She ain't put a cheek, but I just readjusted so that I could land right where I wanted to. After that, all I remember is snapshots. Her removing my shirt, me kissing down to her neck, us becoming one.
What would you say about that? Would you say that that was perhaps something that was written a long time ago by way of him perhaps having feelings for Janie from a longer period back? Because of course these two have known each other for 15 years. Or do you think that perhaps maybe he's seen Janie out jogging and realized that it was her, kind of built up a whole attraction to her, beyond that of a friendship, and so he's then taken the time to pen her a song, probably almost maybe thinking ahead of how he could be in a situation with Janie alone romantically where he could let it slip that perhaps he'd written this song. So maybe somewhat premeditated perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm gathering, I think really the song may have been written while they were still in high school and he had that kind of boy next door vibe, but not wanting to let it show. So that's why even when Janie talks about them being very close during the summer, and then during school, he would act as if she didn't exist. And then, you know, that on again, off again. So I think that he probably had feelings for her during high school, but was himself trying to, you know, push that down and deny it. And so the song may have been written then, but now that he's older, he's thinking of what if I had just made that known? What if, you know, we're both single now, we're both grown now. There are a lot more things that we can do now that we couldn't do before. We're not kids anymore. So how can we go about this as adults? The irony is that that doesn't really happen like that.
Exactly. And I mean, the fact that you even said we're both single now, are they?
Yeah,
Please?
exactly.
Look at the baggage on either end for both of them, you know, both Janie and Lance when it comes to their ex-partners. I mean, a marriage proposal accepted by Janie from Derek, and then we've got Stacey pregnant with Lance's baby. It's crazy. Yeah. And the thing is as well, you know, obviously this is a love audio drama series, written by Diana Copeland, written in a way that allows for social engagement by way of conversating and really kind of flagging up key themes that's coming out, like some of the things that we're talking about now with regards to emotions, you know, and mental health and responsibility, I guess, for the feelings that we have and the impact that those feelings have, not just for individuals, but also to ourselves. Because now, of course, Janie having said yes to Derek's marriage proposal, how does she disentangle herself from that if she really doesn't want to marry Derek and actually wants to remain with Lance? How does she sort of, you know, almost disconnect that without almost looking kind of, you know, very, very lost or almost not quite present to what's actually taken place here, which is that, you know, a man has asked for her hand in marriage. And then I guess the background even intense with that is the fact that, like you've said, there's been no apology actually from Lance with regards to his behavior. I don't actually think there's even been an apology from Derek about his behavior. So where we have our lead character, Janie, right now, she's dealing with the emotional turbulence, upset, heartbreak from two relationships, past and present, that are merging together. So it's kind of like you've just said, a definite situation shift.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, my thing, and I think the kind of the really downside to situationships, like, yes, they may be fun and exciting and new, but when you both aren't on the same page, you also have a difference in reciprocity of the relationship. Because even in the episode, we see Lance is really being like, hey, you need to talk to Derek. You need to make sure that he stops talking to you. You need to make sure that he knows that, like, I'm your man. But you don't see the same intensity of him saying he's going to put that kind of energy into ending his relationship with Stacey. So.
I said the same thing with one of the episodes. I said exactly the same thing on the social engagement aspect of the production. The same thing. I mean, you see Lance very, very, he's almost very, what's the right word? Like, he's very rigid with wanting Janie to, you know, make sure that Derek is aware that their relationship is over. She's not to have any contact with him. And prior to obviously us finding out that Stacey's pregnant with Lance's baby, there was none of that coming from him to Stacey to alleviate the distress and the concern that was obvious on Janie's part. Hence why she's eating ice cream all over again. So the two of them, these two men in her life is impacting her in a way that's really affecting her emotional body. And as women, we are very emotional beings. And so when there is anything that causes a glitch in that or a disconnect, it literally can remove the entire foundation for us, where we can't interface on a normal day-to-day basis in the way that we could, in terms of how we show up as our pure, authentic selves. So I think ultimately, you know, the message that comes out of this production so far for me is the importance of really knowing yourself and not being misled by emotions and feelings, either past or present, that can come up, but staying quite vivid and clear about the present intention. So not the past intention, not the past feelings, but what are the current intentions and the current feelings, coupled with how that person, i.e. Janie, is feeling about the interaction that's happening right now between both Lance and herself, and now, of course, Derek and herself. And then added to that, the ex-partner of Lance, Stacey, who is now pregnant. So, yeah, I think ultimately, if there is anybody within our audience, any listeners that are listening to Better Than Ice Cream, that might find themselves in a similar situation, could you give any words of wisdom about how they might be able to handle such a situation?
I mean, my biggest thing would really be, just like you said, being very steadfast in your values. I think when you don't have a certain idea of what you believe or even what you want, it's very easy to kind of go with the flow of anything, and then you end up in situations like this. And so not only being steadfast in your values, but also being upfront and honest about where you currently are. I think if they both had come from a perspective of, oh, they look good after 15 years and they look good after 15 years, but more so like, look, I just got out of a relationship, you just got out of a relationship, let's take it slow, see where we're going, and then see if it progresses into something. Because I think the way that they started the relationship was built off of the premise that they, like we said, were both single, and now we're figuring out that that's not exactly the case.
Absolutely. So there's probably a level of rebound happening for both Lance and Janie when you think about it, because obviously Lance was engaged to Stacey and was about to marry her. And then that kind of just breaks and dissolves itself. And then we find out, you know, that literally Stacey just sort of flipped on Lance, and she became very stalkerish in her behavior around Lance. And then equally we have, as we said already, Derek sending explicit, you know, sexual nude photographs to other women, causing Janie to end the relationship and to flee. So I think that there is so much that's happened between, you know, both our main characters and their ex-partners, that poor Janie and Lance coming together, there's so much toxicity, so much unresolved feelings and emotions, so much unanswered questions, I think, for both of them, that really needs to be answered, unpicked, you know, resolved, with both of them showing up very authentic and very honest about each other's stories, their past, if they're ever to find, I feel, a way forward as a couple. But hey, we are going to have to wait and see, right? We'll see what happens in episode 6, because wow, episode 5 really ended on a cliffhanger. I mean, it was suspense, drama, toxicity, arguments between the mum, Stacey's pregnant. I mean, wow, doesn't get any more intense. Oh, I just want to thank you again, Deja, for adding such value to our interaction today on what's been quite a unique sort of episode today, by way of you having you in the studio with me, talking especially about the importance of mental health and the impact, the real impact that can have on real individuals and their lives, and how best that they can support themselves by listening to your amazing podcast, Sad Girl Sunday. They can check you out on Apple Podcasts, and they can also find you on your social media, and I'm sure you'll share that handle with us again shortly. However, there's one question I'd like to ask you, which has just come to mind actually. So the title, Sad Girl Sunday, how did that come about? Is there a story behind that?
Yeah, so it's actually quite funny. So I, like I said, you know, it kind of sprouted out of me really wanting to create an Instagram platform where I could just share positive quotes. And so the intention was every Sunday I would put up either a quote or a picture and then kind of give a little bit of a backstory in terms of how I was or where I was in my mental health journey. And so that's where I got that like Sunday from. And so the sad girl was really just me, you know, encapsulating what I was feeling in the moment and just trying to trudge through and break down my mental health, and more so not even really for other people, but for me to kind of understand and unpack what was happening. And I was like, even if nobody sees it, at least I'm getting my feelings out there and I'm just like allowing myself space to kind of heal and move forward. And then the response from the Instagram page was pretty positive, and I was like, oh, okay. And then so it grew and it grew, but it really was just me, sad girl, and then posting stuff on Sundays.
Oh, wow, what a phenomenal story. And I think what I really resonated with when you just shared that was the word healing, that the importance of you having an outlet, being able to express yourself and talk about your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions as they were coming up real time, and being able to also filter that out in a way that allowed you to heal, and then to use that forum to assist and help other individuals on your platform, which is, I think, pretty amazing work. And I just want to thank you again for almost taking up the mantle, you know, and being a beacon by way of what you're actually bringing forward into our communities to assist and help people with their mental health. Phenomenal work, Ada.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Bashira and Diana. I'm literally, like I said, I'm looking so forward to episode 6, because the way episode 5 left, my jaw dropped. I was like, you're pregnant? What? And then the mom's getting into it. So.
No, absolutely agree with you on that. Is there any advice that you would give to any of our viewers, any of our listeners to Better Than Ice Cream, who might actually find themselves in similar positions as to what's happening with Janie and Lance, or perhaps even Stacey and Derek, in terms of, you know, maybe cultivating or changing their attitude about what it is they're doing? But I guess just any words of wisdom that you could possibly give that you could kind of see could connect to your own podcast that you hold with your partner, Sad Girl Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, personally, for Janie and Lance, I think the main thing that they really need to focus on is just like the toxicity of the relationships. I feel like most relationships need to be based on not only trust, but also communication. And it feels like both of them were blindsided with the marriage proposal and the pregnancy.
Sure.
And so having that open and honest, constant communication devoids kind of the blindsiding and the surprises. And especially with things as important as marriage and pregnancy, you always want to make sure that you're having these conversations with your partner, that you're both constantly on the same page, so that you don't get into these kind of love triangle situations. And then my advice really would be for Stacey. I think the biggest thing is trust, because what we know, the first thing we hear about Stacey is the fact that he hired a PI, she was stalking him, all of these other things. And whether that's from kind of being hurt in previous relationships and not really having that trust, no relationship is going to be able to prosper if you don't have that basic foundation of trust. And I feel like she needs to get that before she should even be having a kid with Lance, because while she is coming back to him, yes, we haven't seen how the relationship has resolved in her now trusting him. She says she does, but has she done the work to actually?
Yeah,
you know?
That's such a key point that you've raised there, because at the moment we only really get an insight into the interior thinking of our lead characters, Lance and Janie, but we don't so much get an interior sort of perspective about Stacey or Derek yet. I mean, possibly that is to come. And I think probably one other question I would ask you is, within your podcast, what are the main areas, would you say, of mental health that you see quite prevalent, whether it's in the Black community or as a whole, or, you know, communities worldwide? Is it anxiety? Is it, you know, people feeling quite desperate? Like, what's the kind of, I guess, tentacle of mental health particular that you see coming out within your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, prior to COVID, I would definitely say imposter syndrome was huge, especially in like the educated Black community, being in spaces like grad programs or undergrad, or just being in spaces that you don't really see yourself reflected in can obviously lead to imposter syndrome, because you start getting all of these signs, whether subliminally or not, that you don't really belong in these spaces that you've earned a right to be in. And so that was very big in a lot of the conversations we had, just in the conversations Ida and I had, but then in the podcast, since it started post-COVID, what we really were delving into was just being able to be vulnerable and saying, hey, look, I need help. Let me seek out mental health resources to go, because of the anxiety that COVID has riddled me with, whether it be due to losing loved ones or not having the financial backing that you had pre-COVID, because it's really put us into a very precarious situation, or just the uncertainty of it all can invoke a lot of anxiety. At the beginning of COVID, nobody knew what was going on. And so now that we're kind of after it and we've lost so many loved ones, depression is very big right now. A lot of people who never got to say goodbye to their loved ones, or people who are still trying to process the loss of life, the loss of career, the loss of stability, family structure, all of these break down. So it was originally like, imposter syndrome, all this, and then COVID really put a whole layer of other mental issues that we wanted to unpack.
Absolutely. Wow. Can you please let our listeners and our viewers know again where they can actually tune into your podcast? Because I think that what you're doing is phenomenal work in the community as a whole. And I think it's really important to make sure that our viewers and our listeners know where they can find you, where they can support the work that you're doing. And of course, in terms of them being able to actually get any resources or support from the podcast that you offer, so that they're fully connected and know exactly where to find you.
Absolutely. So we are, like we were saying, we are available on Apple Podcasts. Just look up Sad Girl Sunday, spelled SADGRLSUNDAY. And then you can also find us on Instagram at SADGRLSUNDAY_. We love when people DM us to really talk about, or just request that we speak on certain issues, or even just engaging in our posts. We love it when people ask questions for further information, or they want us to send them specific resources. We are here as a resource. Our whole goal, or the whole purpose of Sad Girl Sunday, is really to not only educate and empower, but also elevate our community. And how we do that is by providing access to resources, access to conversations, and giving people really a space and a forum to be having conversations they might not necessarily be having otherwise.
Sure. Thank you so much, Deja. It's been an absolute pleasure sharing the space with you today. Thank you so much. And I just want to continue to wish you all the best with the work that you're doing in our community.
Thank you.
It's very valuable, and I know that you are appreciated. So thank you from everybody.
Thank you.
In the production, Better Than Ice Cream. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bashira. I know Ida and I are so grateful, and I cannot wait till episode 6. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the best. So guys, there you have it, the amazing Deja Collins, who is one of the CEO, one of the founders of Sad Girl Sunday, a podcast specifically created and really kind of given life, especially out of the pandemic, that's obviously still quite active within our global communities at the moment. And Sad Girl Sunday is a podcast that's available on Apple Podcasts. So anybody seeking to want to listen and to support the work, please do reach out across the social media platforms and connect with the Sad Girl Sunday team. I am Bashira. I am your host week to week for Better Than Ice Cream, the amazing love audio drama series written and produced by Diana Copeland and directed by Julia Sadinsky. So as I mentioned earlier, this week we're not actually going to be running the episode. It was really for me to have an engagement session with the beautiful Deja Collins around the work that she does in our communities specific to mental health, because as you've heard, there is this undertone of mental health that comes out from the characters within Better Than Ice Cream, especially Janie, because she's in such a conundrum. There's so much going on in her life right now. Where does she turn to? Who does she speak to? And how does she get over all of these obstacles emotionally that have her quite, I guess, frozen, paralyzed almost in terms of what's her next move? Now, I know that next week we are going to have an amazing episode. So it is critical that you join me here as you have every week, week to week. I love having you in the studio with me. I love answering your questions and just kind of, you know, getting that whole social engagement aspect running between us, because this is one of the most exciting audio drama series that I personally have heard. And it's a pleasure, a real pleasure, to be the face and the voice for you guys every week as we go through each episode. Remember, guys, this Love audio drama series runs on the Clubhouse TV network, and it is the first guys radio theatre love audio drama series. There will be more, absolutely, but right now we are in the middle, the thick of it, in fact, of Better Than Ice Cream. So I am your host, Bashira. I am a singer, a songwriter, an actor, vocal coach, and a voice coach. And it's been my absolute pleasure having you guys in the studio with me, along with our very special guest, Deja Collins, for Sad Girls Sunday. Please join us again next week for the next exciting, riveting, guys, episode of Better Than Ice Cream. See you next week, and please take care. Bye.